You're listening to the Work Cultured Podcast, where good companies keep good company. Hey, you're listening to the Work Cultured Podcast. Welcome. Today we have Melvin Hines with us, who has a really cool company, and it's a really great story, and I cannot wait to dive in. Melvin, introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about you and the company.
Well, my name is Melvin Hines. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Upswing, and we work with colleges and universities to help improve the persistence rates and ultimately the graduation rates of their online and non-traditional students. We typically are trying to focus on taking just the different types of resources that a campus already has, say, academic advisors, tutors, professors for office hours, mental health counselors, and take all those different silos and put them into one place so that students can easily connect with the right resource at the right time to keep them on track towards graduating and ultimately bettering their lives and their families' lives.
That's excellent. You're about 7 years running now, is that right?
This is on year 10 for us.
10? Wow, I misread that. Yeah. Okay. All right. And you founded it. You're a co-founder, correct?
Yep. We started in 2013 officially. Our first college was in 2014.
Okay. Excellent.
And how many are you working with at the moment, presently?
So we work with around 70 partners. Some are colleges, some are nonprofits. They kind of span the gamut, but for the most part, they're colleges.
Okay. I love reading, a little bit about the story, and I would definitely want to kind of hear your version of the story. But one of the things that I did read, kind of the motto is, we're on a mission to end attrition. Not only does it rhyme a little bit, but to keep people engaged and keep people in school till the finish line. So are you, I don't know, I want to hear kind of your story of how y'all came to found the company, and I was reading a little bit about some of the conversations y'all were having and how your own experiences played into it.
It's something that has definitely been near and dear to my heart for a long time. I originally kind of got the bug, if you will, just through my own personal experiences. As you mentioned, I grew up in a small town in South Georgia called Albany. And in that town, we had a lot of students who didn't have access to some of those same resources that you would typically, hope that one would have, the ones that we were just talking about earlier. And what that did was, we saw that in terms of just a huge dropout rate in terms of our high school class. So in my freshman class, there were 250 students that started with us. By the time graduation came around, there were only 68 remaining. And so to me, that was. And so to me, that was one of those moments where you recognize that something isn't quite right, but you're not sure what. I fortunately had the opportunity to go to the University of Georgia, which was considered, kind of the holy grail, if you will, when I was in high school.
A football team, Melvin?
They have an okay football team. They've been winning past couple of years. So everyone thinks that that's just the way it's always been, but actually they haven't won anything in my entire lifetime. So the last couple of years has been amazing. But yeah, I went to the University of Georgia, and just kind of saw how the other half lives, where people from Atlanta high schools, for example, had all these resources in their high schools where they had AP courses and IB courses, and they had international exchange courses, and they had SAT and ACT prep, and it was almost as if UGA was a fallback school for them because there was so much more available to them. And that really led me to asking the question of why is it that where you live dictates so much of your lot in life, and how can that be changed? So that really was where I just jumped into wanting to just get into educational equity. I started doing a few tutoring and mentoring organizations while in college, did Big Brother Big Sisters as well. I went to law school at Duke University. After that, where I had the chance to start a law review called the Duke Forum for Law and Social Change. And through that experience, I connected in with the new dean of North Carolina Central University, the local HBCU here, and they were working on an initiative to help improve first-year student persistence, and asked if I would be willing to also help participate. And I said sure, and so I did that for 3 years.
Is this all while still in college?
This was all while still in school, yeah. So I was doing a lot of things simultaneously, and the benefit of that was that I was a lot closer in age to the students, and so they certainly related to me in a way that was different from some of the others, and the questions that I would get would be questions that weren't about our class, but about everything outside of class. How did you decide what you wanted to do, what career you wanted to achieve, those types of things. And I just began to notice that, man, this whole idea of there being this disconnect between where students are and the resources that they have is much more pervasive than just Albany, Georgia. And so in 2013, I connected in with my co-founder, Alex, and we decided we wanted to try and give it a go. Let's see what we could do if we made something like this a lot more scalable, where instead of supporting 30 students, we were working with 30,000 students. And so ever since then, we've kind of just been off to the races.
That's incredible. What have you found to be some of the biggest pivotal disconnects and pieces of issues that make things so inequitable? Like, what are the big things that you're really hitting?
Yeah. So I would say the first big thing is the recognition of how many students are actually non-traditional. And of course, by non-traditional, we're talking about student parents, adult learners. We're talking about those who are working full-time jobs while in school, veterans. I think people tend to think that the typical student is the 18 to 22-year-old on-campus resident, but actually they've increasingly become the non-traditional student, if you will. The majority of all students today fall into that former category. So that's the first thing that we kind of had to dispel, because there were a lot of students that were suffering in silence because schools weren't built for them. What a lot of these students have in common is that they usually can't go talk to an advisor 9 to 5, Monday through Thursday. They can't speak to a tutor. They can't connect in with the mental health counselor during those times. And even if they could, they're not always able to make it on campus. They're having to figure out ways to connect in remotely, and that becomes an issue as well when campuses have historically been mostly focused on just their physical buildings. So it was a struggle in the beginning to just help, I think, people recognize just how big and pervasive an issue it is. We would tell them that, look, these non-traditional students are dropping out at twice the rate as your on-campus students. If you are wanting to figure out how to keep more of your tuition dollars inside campus, you really need to think about your students that are outside of your campus. I think that it was something that people considered to potentially be an issue, but maybe not the top issue before the pandemic. But when the pandemic hit and all of a sudden every campus had 100% online students, all of a sudden they began to realize just how terrible their online experiences were, and especially with so many students flocking towards campuses like Arizona State Online and Southern New Hampshire University and Western Governors, these large colleges that have gotten almost perfected the online experience. It made them realize that, man, we have to become a lot more competitive and a lot better able to support our non-traditional students. And so we've certainly seen that shift change over the course of the last couple of years.
Did you see a lot of attrition during the pandemic? Like those last few years, has attrition gone up in a significant way?
Yeah. I mean, for a couple of reasons, right? The first, of course, is that unfortunately, a lot of families dealt with losing loved ones during the pandemic. This was more acutely affected in some of the more rural areas, like the ones that we typically tended to focus on. And so, if you weren't, let's say, the person that was affected either with a long-term illness as a result or something to that effect, you probably had maybe an aunt, an uncle, a parent, maybe a child who dealt with that. All those were reasons why students were leaving. The second issue is that if you found a way to kind of navigate through all those pieces, was that a lot of our students, particularly our adult learners, were, service industry professionals. They were frontline workers in a lot of cases. They were people that were the most likely to be at risk. And they were the ones most likely to have lost their jobs as well, as the service industry took a huge hit. So that could be a second reason that students would leave college, is that they just couldn't afford college anymore. The third was really around not having the tools and technology to support them during that time period. So after you've gotten past those first two, you then need to have this laptop at home with Wi-Fi that is strong enough to be able to go to all your classes, and enough laptops for maybe your two kids who are also at home and having to do the exact same thing. It was a lot to juggle all at the same time. And so between those three things, and not even including the things like, isolationism, the anxiety, things like that really started percolating in terms of mental health issues, we really started to see a lot of students saying that, this college thing isn't for me right now.
Ouch. And then obviously there's not much that you can do to adjust those levers, at least the first two, but you do come in on that third lever of the access to better technology. I mean, that is your software, right? Like, this is a platform for colleges to bring them to the level of the Arizona's, like, those online first colleges that you're mentioning, right?
Yeah, that's exactly how we look at it. Is even in the first couple, we found ways to be able to help provide levels of support as well. A lot of times, students think that they have to go it alone. But really, their communities do have ways to support them. There's emergency grants and aids and funding for students who've lost their jobs or who are going through rough patches. There are those mental health counselors for those who are dealing with bereavement, loss, things like that. But most students, particularly those who are your online non-traditional students, have no idea that they even exist. And so a big part of what we really wanted to do was bring all these resources into one place so that we can make it easier for students to have someone to feel like there's someone who cares that they're even going through this process, and two, that can point them to the right direction. And so because of that, we've really seen a huge explosion in the work that we've done through our virtual assistant Anna, where we went from maybe tens of thousands of messages a year to the millions of messages per year, and it hasn't actually gone down since then.
Wow. Now, I mean, your employees must love this, right? I mean, work culture, the podcast, we talk about company culture, and many leaders find a way to get their people bought in to the mission, even if it's, we're waiting tables, right? But I mean, you guys, you're changing the world of, post high school learning, right? I mean, that's got to feel good to you as a leader. It's got to feel good to your employees. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier to use the changing the world mantra than if you're just kind of designing an app. Yep. That's for sure. But even still, you have to come up with unique and novel and creative ways to remind people the why behind the things that they're doing, because at the end of the day, a large part of the day-to-day work is still technology driven. So we're still pushing code, we're still finding bugs, we're still dealing with supporting admins, which sometimes you make them happy, sometimes you don't. So I'd say that my role is to really help to remind our team and inspire them to stay focused. A big part of, for example, last June, we all came together, actually here in Durham, for an all hands offsite, and as part of that, I brought in to speak to them our very first admin that we ever had from Central Carolina Community College almost 10 years ago. And she was speaking about what made her decide to choose Upswing when, there were clearly bigger companies, and why they've decided to stick with us over the years, which was really cool. We also had a chance to tour Durham Tech Community College, which is right down the street. And they really absolutely loved that. We stayed, I think, an hour longer than we were supposed to. People just kept asking a myriad of questions and just came away with all these ideas. And so that's a big part of what we wanted to do within our culture, is to just make sure that they stay true to that mission, that we're hiring people that care about what we're trying to do in this world, and that we are able to, everyone from the sales team all the way to the engineers gets that opportunity to have that real world experience.
Yeah.
I love that. You're
like 100, 150 employees, is that about right?
No.
So LinkedIn said like 128, and I was guessing it was somewhere in there. So how many employees do you have then?
Yeah. So we have our full-time employment base, and then we have our network of coaches. And what we found over the course of time is that many of the coaches, which certainly is a positive, will certainly say that they are part of Upswing.
They work,
and
okay.
We love it. Yeah, but they're not full-time employees of Upswing.
Yeah.
So
how many then do you have full time?
Full time, we have about 25 people, and then our coaching network is around 250 people.
Oh, 250. Okay, nice. Wow.
And that's spread all across the country, right?
Yeah.
It's still growing.
Yeah, and I mean, many of our coaches have been working with us longer than our longest tenured employees. So it makes sense that they would
absolutely.
Be tied to Upswing, which we absolutely love.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Now, one thing, and generally, and I don't know if we'll edit this or not, but normally earlier on, we'll ask this question, and I sent you this in an email to think about, but the question is simple. What's a mistake that you've made in leadership that you'll never forget? I know we've talked about a lot of great things, but I'd love to hear that answer.
Yeah, so I wrote down a couple to see which one might make the most sense to talk about. They all really have to do with, I think, decisions for for your team members. So the first one that I wrote down was just taking too long to let someone go. I think that one has certainly been something I had to learn from. First of all, it's a part of starting any company that no one likes, and that you almost pretend that won't happen, but that's actually going to be the case. Even if you do the best, most perfect job in your hiring criteria, there will be a time when that person is not either a good fit or the organization has evolved to not be a good fit for that person. I think that what I've had to learn over the course of time is that the longer you try and almost force the relationship to stay there, the worse it's going to be, not just for the organization, but for the people who work in the organization as well. In one particular case that I can remember, I had someone who wasn't a good cultural fit, but was pretty good at sales. And so it was really hard to let her go. And then a few weeks later, someone who reported to her put in their notice, and it really surprised us all because we thought he had a lot of potential. And one of the things that he said was, every day that I got up, I had to remind myself that I was going to have to go to work and work for her, and that was the motivation I needed to look for another job. And that was one of those moments where I recognized that not doing something that needed to be done wasn't just affecting me, but was affecting other people in the organization. And after we did eventually let her go, others told us about just more instances, basically, where we should have definitely done that a lot sooner. So that was definitely one thing. I would say the other one was that I was thinking about is just around promoting employees to keep them. This one is a very challenging one because if they're really good employees, you want to find a way to keep them. But I mean, that sounds like an axiom that would always be true. But the problem is that if you are a smaller company, you don't always have many of those pathways forward. And so what you end up with is a lot of times creating roles that didn't really exist in your original plan, or promoting people to, say, managerial roles where they're maybe not quite ready yet. And again, you start affecting other parts of the organization because you can be too bloated as an organization. You can have other people reporting to that person who feel like they're not being supported, for example, and you just make that person themselves more miserable because that wasn't what they were really good at. And so what I've had to learn here is that you still need to give every employee who works at your organization a pathway forward and help them to build on that pathway, whether it's internal or external resources. But you also have to make clear that when they feel like they are ready to move to, say, a different position or category, there may or may not be that position available in-house, but that you will certainly make sure that they are available or that they're ready to be able to do that either here within Upswing or somewhere else. That's kind of been the good compromise that we've kind of stuck to, I'd say, over the course of the last few years.
Now, did that mean that y'all maybe created or implemented a new or existing tool for career planning, or what did that make y'all do as far as that once you recognized that was a need you had?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, we I guess you could call it a new tool, but it was basically just kind of Google Sheets. It's basically we would create. We basically, a lot of times we have younger people on our team as well. So a lot of times they're not 100% sure where they want to go. So we kind of help them to see where they could go with the skill sets that they're learning currently. once they know, have an idea of that, the idea is to say, okay, this is typically what this position would require. The skill sets that you might need. So you might need a better, acumen when it comes to analytics, or when it comes to learning a different type of code language, or managerial, training, right? So once we've created those bullet points, and this is what is likely necessary for this role, then we go and look for ways to help them with checking the box for each one of those tasks, if you will, with the idea being that, by the time they've kind of checked all the boxes, ideally we have that role available in-house for them. But if not, they know that it's a position that they can look for outside of Upswing as well.
Yeah, so you're creating this like graduation plan for people, regardless of whether or not you have that next level role for them.
Exactly. Yeah.
I like that. I wonder if some people stick around just because you've fostered that kind of environment, or if they really take you up on it and go, yeah, I am ready to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I would say it's there's certainly people who do one versus another, for sure. I think that people do strongly believe in our mission. We try and have a strong people culture as well. Certainly, there have been a lot of people who've said that, from a people culture perspective, it's been one of the strongest organizations they've worked for. And so it's been good to see people stick around for those reasons, and want to be a part of not just benefiting from the culture, but also contributing to that culture as well. And sometimes that's important to them. And because we were startup, a lot of times we do have roles that we need that we didn't anticipate, and sometimes people will say that's actually a role that I'm really interested in, and we kind of help them to be able to mold towards that as well. We just had a person who was on our support team move into our product team because of a need that we had there, and because that was something that she was really interested in learning more about. And so we've certainly seen movements jump like that quite a few times as well.
That's really cool. I love that. I like both of the things that you kind of picked to talk about there, because almost every leader has been in both of those positions. I certainly was. The person that I knew needed to go, it took too long to pull the trigger, and then as soon as I did, people come out of the woodworks and like, you don't even know how bad it is. And so for those listeners that are in this spot, if you are aware that somebody needs to go, you're the last one to become aware. So if you think that's true, it's definitely most assuredly true. Pull that trigger.
Absolutely.
And then the last piece too, what you're just talking about, I think we've all been there too. Do I promote this person to become a manager just because they're good at the role they're in? Well, maybe, I guess. Let me try. Oh, that didn't work.
Right.
But you have to have a succession plan. You have to have that evolution path in some form or fashion, and different companies will implement different strategies. And I really like that yours is, hey, we're going to equip you to, spread your wings and fly, regardless of whether or not
you
it's
stay
with
here
us.
or not.
Yeah, that's really wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, and I think as the employees, they feel that, because no one wants to be at a place where they don't see a future, and that belief in, even thinking about over our years together, you see someone and you want to believe they've got it in them, but at the same time, that person hopefully believes the same thing of I can do this, and I can climb up, but there still needs to be a clear path. Now,
exactly.
It's okay. I want to switch a little bit, because I'm on the wrong page here. As I was reading on Glassdoor, one of the reviews said that Upswing definitely knows how to provide the ideal virtual office experience. And several other reviews mentioning that of the company culture and the things that we're doing in this virtual environment are, ideal, perfect, or some of the other words. So is there any secret to what you guys did as the pandemic came in? Or what would you say is the thing that really made it special for you, or is making it currently?
So that has definitely been a challenge for sure. I mean, of course, it was a challenge for everyone.
Sure.
I think there were a couple things that we did. Fortunately, we started trying some things before the pandemic even hit. So, we really tried to listen to people. Well, a couple of things. One, we had one person come to us and say, "Hey, you all, or as the leadership team, you're kind of dealing with a lot of things that you're juggling, and some things tend to fall through the crack. We want to create a culture committee, and so
this was before the pandemic."
This was before the pandemic, right?
Okay.
Originally, it just started off as things like, remember birthdays and anniversaries and things like that. And it's just like, we'll take all the help we can get. And then as part of that, one of the things that they suggested was we wanted to have one day being a work from home day. I think it was Wednesday or something like that. And, it was like this crazy novel concept, right? And what we learned through that was that there were certain things that we needed to make sure people knew to do in order for it to work. So things like, making sure that everyone was available, on Slack during certain time periods. That if we're doing a video session, that to the extent that you can, everyone has their video on. Those types of things. We had already kind of started this dry run, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hits, and those rules become the rules for 5 days a week, not just 1 day a week. So that was kind of the first thing that I think we benefited from, was already kind of having that dry run. But what also took place, I would say, was our culture committee just really stepped it up and started thinking about ways in which we can make everyone feel connected. So everything from, we would do these events that were physical events, but in a virtual environment. So like, I always forget the name of those plants that are, that last forever. I think you have one right there on the stool.
Succulent kind of things? Or
like
the snake plant.
Yeah, like creating different succulents and things like that. So they would mail out all the stuff to everyone's houses, and we would have a session where we'd all come together and figure out how to make succulents, for example, or a baking class, or things like that. We also would do different types of virtual happy hours during the early days of the pandemic, when everyone was just kind of wanting to, get out, but they couldn't. About 3 months in, we decided, we realized we were going to have to make a decision on were we going to continue to stay this way or not. And that was a really hard decision, because some people were wanting to move to different places. Others were looking to travel for a bit. And so we decided that we would put it up for a vote. And by the narrowest of margins, people decided they wanted to stay fully remote. So what we decided was that rather than just saying, okay, we're going to take advantage of not paying for rent anymore, we were going to earmark the money that typically would go for rent, and instead we were going to use that, of course, when we were able to do these in-person events, with the idea being that we would do them at least twice a year. And so we had our first event in fall of 2021, I believe. And then 3 or 4 months later, there was another COVID flare up. And so we had to, go back remote again. And then I think our second event was last summer. And so during these events, basically, they're week long. We try to do things like bring in people in the local community, who are going to talk about their experiences with Upswing, try and bring in students, bring in faculty. We also try to just put in opportunities for them to do team building exercises, just a lot of different things like that are happening on a recurring basis, so that it helps to sustain the why behind what we're doing over the course of the next, say, 6 months or so, until our next event. And then in that 6-month period is kind of when our culture committee picks it up and continues to do events that are, like we have our our monthly lunch and learns. We have our monthly fireside chats. We have our monthly quarterly all hands events, things like that are all about making it so that people are constantly knowing what everyone else is doing and feeling connected to the rest of the team as well. I know that was a long answer.
Yeah, you guys definitely sound like you were on the forefront of it. Now, as you're thinking of the next few years and your future planning, can you share maybe some of the plans that y'all have over the next few years for continued growth and kind of building on what you've been doing?
Yeah. So the goal certainly is to continue with these in-person offsites. We're still planning to do them twice a year. What we learned was that winter and summer are not the best times to do them because so let's see, last summer was very hot, and winter was very cold. And so we wanted to kind of moderate the temperatures. We also wanted to avoid the COVID spikes as much as possible. So probably more of doing it like Q2 and Q4. The benefit of that being that students are back in school as well, so we can tour campuses when students are actually there, which we can ask them more questions than we've been able to, that sort of stuff. We also, on a quarterly basis, have our leadership team meet in person as well, with the idea being that they're the ones who are going to set the plan, set the vision for the next few months, so that everyone always kind of knows what's coming up next, and we can just stay connected that way as well. And then in terms of our culture committee, we're constantly iterating on ways in which we can make it a lot more inclusive for just different and new groups of people as they're coming in. We're looking at ways in which we can also give money to just different individual departments as well to host their own event, so it doesn't have to be the big event all the time. And then
individual departments can do their own in-person events, you mean?
Exactly. So we have a sales and marketing and I think customer success team kickoff that's taking place in San Diego, for example. So things like that that be able to do. And then just more of those things that we're talking about where we want to make sure people are focused on their career growth pathways. And so there's a stipend that allows people to pursue things that are of interest to them, and of course work from home stipends and things like that as well.
I love that.
Yeah, we not every department had it, but we had our big summit where everybody would come in, and then of course the sales, marketing, we had the sales kickoff, and those were always a little more, as the boss, I had to kind of step out around 9 p.m. because things got a little crazy, but it's fun though.
People love to get together and enjoy themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know why salespeople want to enjoy themselves more than they ought to, but
that's a good point.
And are most people in the same city, or are you guys everywhere, like just all over the place?
We're all over the place, although it has been interesting to see how many people have moved to North Carolina since we've moved here. So we have a strong concentration here, so much so that we've created a channel inside called Upswing. And we'll just kind of get together every so often throughout the summer and just do little localized events here.
I love that.
Yeah. So culture-wise, people-wise, moving into future years and growth, what challenges do you think you're going to run into?
I would say consistently the biggest challenge is making sure that your mission, making sure that your vision is not diluted as you're getting larger. To me, this happens a couple of ways. One, especially when you're kind of in the fundraising process, you're not as involved every day as you were in the past. But even if you're not doing that, you're not seeing everyone one-to-one, you certainly don't have that same level of in-person connection that you could have if everyone was in the same place. And so what can happen is that a company full of mission and vision and wonder and excitement can very easily kind of get diluted into just being, for the other person, just a series of squares on a video conferencing solution that people, don't have any connection to. And so them, say, leaving the company is as quick as them just, turning off one camera and turning on another camera. So how do you combat that as you're getting larger? This is where really having a strong leadership team that is not just supporting what you're saying, but amplifying what you're saying is really key. This is something I had to learn a lot over the course of the last, I'd say, 12 months or so. My board was telling me about how important this was. For the longest time, it was basically just kind of Alex, my co-founder, and myself doing everything. And so we really sort of, leaned on each other, and we're the leadership team, for everyone. And our board was telling us that, you guys are going to stifle growth if you keep making it just on the two of you all. You really have to build and imbue a leadership team with these levels of responsibility. And so over the course of the past 12 months, we've really tried to get stronger at that, making sure that everyone else recognizes the importance of these different things that we used to be the ones doing. And I think that it's helped out a pretty good bit.
Yeah. And how big is that leadership team now?
So we have 5 people currently on our leadership team.
Okay. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I think that is a challenge for sure. As you grow, you're going to get pulled in many different directions, and that vision, that mission has to stay at the forefront. Sometimes it can get lost to the minutia, especially when you first start growing. It's not necessarily with people, it's with workload.
Right.
You have to manage like their work-life balance and the mission and the vision while you're trying to find the right people for the right seats to, expand. So yeah, that is a challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well,
and it becomes even more challenging because, with Alex and myself, I mean, we were good friends before we started Upswing, and he was best friend or best man at my wedding, for example. So you're moving from this place where basically you all know each other super well, and that makes it easier to almost be able to predict what the other person's going to say or do. To moving to this leadership team full of new people, who might respond differently to a set of pressure than you would have, or who might forget to stay focused on the mission when, like you were talking about, the workload becomes bigger than the people load. And so how do you give the freedom for them to be individualistic while also making sure that they don't stray too far away from the mission and vision that you want the organization to hold? Like that's been its own kind of set of balances that you have to kind of navigate through as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, this has been really good. I know that every leader listening can relate to all the different things you've been talking about. That piece of growth and the couple of quote unquote mistakes and things that you're learning along the way. And this has been really wonderful. We are just in the interest of time and making sure that we keep you to your schedule and you're able to keep going. We'll kind of move to the next piece of the podcast, which is talking about that psychometric analysis that you took.
Which is interesting that you just mentioned making sure that people feel they're individuals and the individualist, because yours was individualist.
Yeah, that's the nickname that your results got.
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to read that, and did it feel like it resonated?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say people would probably agree with many of those things that were in there.
Okay.
Yeah, so when we bring this up in the podcast, we like to talk about how it kind of like plays into our leadership style. And then there's 4 different factors, but the ones that stick out to me because of what it is you're doing are what they call the dominance, which is it's the drive to influence people and in situations, events, and things like that. Now you're a CEO, so that's a really good kind of natural drive to have. Do you feel like you have people on your leadership team that might be opposite, that you feel like you butt heads on that kind of aspect at all?
I would say, so we took a similar kind of team-based analysis before, probably, when was this? Last summer, I think. And
which one do you remember?
Oh man, I can't remember now. It's the guy who ran it would be mad at me right now. But it was it was a good one. I'll just say it was a good one. But basically, what was really interesting was that in that one, they had different words as well. And so I remember one that stuck out to me was being the galvanizer. So the person who is pushing to kind of and influencing to make things happen. And then the question is, okay, how many other people on your team are like that? And at least for that one in particular, no one else was like that. And so, to get to your butt heads question, one of the things that he was saying, which was so spot on, was that, you're probably going to be in a place where you are going to really want to move something forward, make something happen, try and get, this task checked off. And your team, I think their top ones were like questioner and something else like that, would be a lot more likely to want to kind of dissect the problem a bit more, make sure that things are correct, that sort of stuff, and so you guys have to figure out how to balance through that, and that's exactly what takes place.
Your formality is low, which is like the kind of attention to detail. Sure, details are, I guess, important, but for you, rules are more like suggestions, and so like good enough is good enough. Let's make let's make this happen. The other one that stood out, it was your extroversion is low, so you're more of an internal processor compared to a verbal processor. And I'm curious if you have anybody on your leadership team that they're verbal processors, because anytime they have an idea, they just want to talk it out, and you're sitting there going. I mean, you do have psychological patience. That's one of the things it told me. So that you have patience, you can listen.
You have to learn
to. Does it drive you crazy at the same time sometimes when people just want to talk it out? And you're just like, okay, what's happening right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I find myself having to almost kind of talk to myself in a way to remind myself of the situation. So First, obviously, there's going to be a little bit of kind of friction / frustration of just, man, I really feel like this is the third time this has been said, and I basically get the gist. But then I have to remember that, okay, this is how this person processes, and so just let them just continue to process, and whatever comes out at the end, that's what I respond to.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, your processing is happening up here in your head, right? And if you could visualize all of the crazy that happens before you get to that final place, you just get to hear it with those verbal processors. They're telling you all of the crazy, and then the last thing they say is really kind of where they landed and what they were trying to get to the whole time.
Right. Which could, in some cases is exactly where you were, right? So what I've learned is that if you try and jump in too early, sometimes you're kind of doing yourself a disservice, because maybe you've already figured out what you think might be the best case scenario for a particular situation. But if you let them kind of think through the different rabbit holes and the traps and things like that, sometimes they actually get to it as well. We were actually just talking about a particular situation just this week, actually, where we were trying to talk about our strategic leadership plan, and there were all these slides that I had created that were about just the historical background of how we got to this plan, and people were saying, "Oh, there's a lot of information in here. I think it's going to be information overload. We probably shouldn't share all this." And so then it's just like, okay, we'll kind of put a pin in that, and then later on, people, the same conversation came up of, I wanted to know how we got to this part of the strategic plan. Like I think there needs to be more information on how we got there, and so it's kind of the point where it's like, well, we have these slides here, if you remember, and so it kind of helps people to have their own sort of process sometimes of getting to it, as opposed to just sort of, especially as CEO, it's so easy to say, no, this is my answer, but to allow people to kind of get to the point where they're learning the benefit of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's so great. Before we kind of hit the very last section, is there anything you want to plug? An idea or the company itself or a side project you're working on?
A book you've been reading?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, let's see it. Obviously, if anyone's interested in Upswing, they should check us out. It's upswing.io, so pretty simple. I have a book that I am a big fan of. Everyone who knows me knows about this book, but it's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Why I love this book so much is that there's millions of business books out there, and they're all kind of written in these I'm forgetting the word, where everything is just absolutes, and it's just, this is how you do this is how you do that, and usually to sound cool, they'll throw some curse words in there as well along with it. But the thing about the hard thing about hard things, which does have a lot of curse words, is that his whole purpose is to say that there are very few things that are absolutes in business, and that there are always trade-offs, and that his goal is to share with you what those trade-offs are, so that you can decide what's the best for your business, but that you had to make some sacrifices. Oh, and by the way, whatever decision you make could have been the best decision of all the decisions that were available, and people might still think it's a bad decision because they didn't know what the alternatives were. I'm reading it for the third time, and it's still revelatory to me. So I would absolutely tell people The Hard Thing About Hard Things. They should read that.
Thanks
okay.
for sharing.
Yes.
Yeah, we got that down.
Great recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like at this point, unless we've got anything else, we do have a fun little way that we like to sign off. It's a quick fire kind of this or that. And,
okay.
I'll list off a couple of things, and you'll just say the first one that comes to mind. So, first one: salt or pepper?
Salt.
Yeah, you got to have salt on your food, right? I feel like I know the answer to this one, but Google or Microsoft?
Google.
Google, absolutely. And then this one, especially since we just talked about that book, are you a fan of a hard copy or the audio book?
I would say hard copy.
Okay, nice. And call or text?
Text.
Text.
That's that low beat rate. Yeah, for sure. He was going to say text. Yep.
And then last one, same thing. I think I know the answer to this one, but football or soccer?
Go Dogs.
Yes. And here's the thing. I grew up in Louisiana, LSU boy. My family still has LSU season tickets, so I will say that I was definitely a Georgia Bulldog fan on that night. And even though we're in Texas, I hope no one gets mad at me, but all season long I wanted someone to do to TCU what y'all did to TCU. So that was just a real treat to see. I loved it.
Hey,
fun fact, I was in Texas during that game.
Oh, yeah? Were you really?
Yeah.
I love it.
Melvin, this has been an absolute privilege for us to have you on, to have these conversations. We big thanks. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I would definitely say next time you find yourself in Austin, please do let us know. We'd love to have a drink and get to shake hands and talk some more in real life. So We'll do. That sounds awesome. Look forward to it.
Yeah. Well, for the podcast episode, this is Work Culture. This has been Melvin Hines of Upswing, and we are signing off. Thank you.